Welcome to Tales, Tunes, and Tomfoolery starring Jerry Springer, along with Gene Galvin and me. I'm Megan Hills. We're recorded live in front of a brilliant studio audience at the Folk School Coffee Parlor in Ludlow, Kentucky.
My daddy came
And now, ladies and gentlemen, here he is, the one, the only Jerry Springer!
Oh, my! I was doing.
I tell you, Megan looks so much older.
Yeah, really. That's my half-ass rendition of either Megan Hills or now Bree Long. Brianna Long, Bree we call her.
Yes.
Is a college student at the University of Cincinnati.
Right.
She's a co-op student here.
And she's handling our social media.
She's doing our social media, and
Yeah.
she's great. And I said, hey, why don't you sit in Megan's chair? Megan has a day job, does a lot of traveling.
She's trying to push Megan out of the job and get it herself.
You think so?
She's very
really,
pushy.
Very pushy. And so we said, come on up, sit down, and do that. Hey, ladies and gentlemen, here he is, one and the only Jerry Springer, or some version of that.
Yes.
And she said, no, I'm freaking out.
What?
I don't know.
Whoa. You get a chance once in your life to be able to say,
at the right hand
Jerry
of Jerry Springer. Yeah, won't do it.
And you would pass on that?
Yeah, won't do it. I think we should try to get her up here. I think
Let's everyone give her a big hand. Here she is.
Here's
How about it? Hey. Oh. Okay.
Hey, you know what I like?
I tell you what, $100.
$100.
Right here.
Get it out.
Right here.
This is good.
This is yours. $100 to come
that's
up
good.
here and say, "Here's Jerry."
You know
If you
what
can pass this
I'm going to
up,
tell
she's
you.
gotta be one wealthy young woman.
I love this about her. She is like, I'm not going to do it. And I say, no, then don't do it.
Oh, that is.
Hey, Bree, he will give you $100. Do you understand that?
100.
Do you understand? He will give you $100.
It's tempting.
You're tempted. Put it right there for just a minute.
I'm putting it right there.
Not long. Just put it right there.
I'm going to regret.
By the way, we will not disrespect you if you come up. But there it is,
No.
right there.
For $100, you do it.
We're going to give her 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Take it back.
Yeah.
Get it back. Oh, my God! Oh, my God! Oh, my God! No. He says no. No. No, it shows in reruns now. If it wasn't, it'd be out of there. It'd be right there. Wait a second. Louis Beck's in the house.
Oh.
Put 500 up there, Louis. Bree Long is a strong woman. I love that.
That is amazing.
Not going to do it. Hey, by the way, we have this thing called the Songwriter Stump at jerryspringer.com. And it's where songwriters can submit music to us to then potentially be on our show to be featured. And we get plenty of them. And we've had some of our guests, some of our musical acts, because we feature up-and-coming songwriters or well-known songwriters, it doesn't matter, and it's all original music. So we got this unusual submission. And it's from a guy, and this is all I know. His name is Ramsey Daniels III. He calls himself the Suburban Blues Man. And here's what he says. He's got a new album out called Suburban Blues, and it's heard on all the usual platforms. He's a Wall Street stockbroker. He lives in Connecticut. He works in Manhattan. And he has liner notes that say, this is a quote from him, "Who tells the stories of the affluent? Our pathos, our pain, our daily struggles about rising jet fuel costs.
Amen.
Busy streets when I'm trying to get somewhere in New York.
I hear you, brother.
The lack of parking spaces in front of Starbucks in the morning.
Oh, man.
Sure," he goes on to say in his liner notes, "sure, the poor have their annoyances, but my life is busy and I have to stay on schedule." These are some of the songs. We're going to play a cut. It's the title song from his album, The Suburban Blues. And here are some of the songs from his album. "My Tesla done broke the fuck down." That's one of the songs on his album. "My Tesla done broke the fuck down." Here's another one. This is amazing. I don't know. I don't feel good about this guy. Here's another one. Get out my damn way. Now this one, when you read the liner notes, he had a power lunch with some stockbrokers at a 5-star downtown, and there were so many tourists in the street that he was late. So he went back to his office and wrote a song called Get Out My Damn Way. He's got another one. If you buy a Mont Blanc pen, Jerry, you probably have about 8 of them. And the fountain pens that you fill with ink, if you fly...
My people fill them.
Your people fill them. So you know that if you fly in like a Learjet and you're at about 45,000 feet...
can squirt out.
They blow up.
Yes.
They blow up.
Yes.
So he ruined an Armani suit with a Mont Blanc pen. He wrote a song called Mont Blanc...
Been there.
Okay. This song is Mont Blanc Blows Blues. The Mont Blanc Blows Blues. So I don't know.
And we don't even know Blue's first name.
No. So Ramsey Daniel...
Oh, give it a rest.
That's bad.
That's horrible.
So I got to play just a little piece of this title cut of this song. Well, I woke up this morning, said how'd I get in this goddamn jail? Yeah, I woke up this morning, said how'd I get in this goddamn jail? I got overserved in that wine bar, and I smashed up my new Jaguar. So I'll pay my bail, head up Starbucks way. Yeah, I pay my goddamn bail, head up Starbucks way. And I stuffed my nose with cocaine, start my stockbroker day. I got them suburban blues, I got them suburban blues. I so drunk this morning, I peed all over my shoes. That's the Suburban Blues Man. That's Ramsey Daniels III.
If we could ever get him here.
Here's what he said. I'll tell you one last thing, and then I want to move on here. But I said...
that wasn't in our notes.
Thought it was in here, yeah. I asked him, I said, would you come on our show? And he said, no. Well, yes and no. He said, I'm really trying to move my musical career because he says, I'm loving it, and there are so many stories that the suburban people need to have told. And I'll tell them, he said. But he says, when people find out who I am, they want to beat my ass. They want to beat him up, on the streets and stuff, because they think it's just obnoxious that he's saying
it is kind of obnoxious.
The blues like a person from Mississippi or from Memphis
someone
or
would even
Coalfields
think
or
to
Appalachia.
write it.
Right. So he said that he'll
And then
come on.
record it without musical lessons.
We're not going to do that.
I mean,
Yeah.
what my people say.
Big balls. Hey, so he says, I'll come on the show,
Yeah.
but I have to camouflage my voice. So he says what he'll do, and we'll do this on a future show, is you ask a question, and I'll ask him, and he'll be on the phone, and he'll give an answer, and I'll give it back through me. So he wants to filter it through me so he doesn't get identified.
And also clean it up.
And clean it up some, right? Suburban Blues Man. Hey, the other night, I had you over for dinner at my home. My wife.
It was lovely. It
made
was very nice.
A wonderful meal. Had my
She
brother
certainly
and
did.
his
Your
wife
brother
Robin.
Jerry and Robin was very nice.
And we had
actually. It was
a
very
really
nice.
nice time. You came to my home. You parked in my driveway. You came up my steps. You sat at my dinner table.
It was a little embarrassing. I hadn't been to a neighborhood like that.
Right. I got them suburban blues.
That's not what I was thinking.
No.
But
So.
anyway.
The question, and I had a lot of people ask me this, so I'm asking this for lots of other people who say, why come? That's how they say it where I live. Hey, by the way, we're endorsing Julie Terry Navarre for Ludlow City Council.
Right.
So she is officially endorsed.
Yes.
by the Jerry Springer podcast.
And I got to tell you, when you get endorsed by this podcast,
well, look what happened the last time.
Right.
Matt Catfish Williams was endorsed by the Jerry Springer podcast.
And he came in
first because
Yes.
of that endorsement.
Yes.
So we're endorsing.
This is a slam dunk.
A slam dunk. So we're endorsing Julie. And we ask everyone who lives in Ludlow to vote for Julie, Terry, Navarre. If you don't live in Ludlow, move in
Yes.
very quickly
Yes.
and vote for Julie.
Yes.
I digress. People have said to me,
Duh.
Jerry sat at your dining room
Yes,
table,
yes.
ate your free food.
Yes.
How many times have you been in any home of his, and you have 6? I'll just say, I know you have 6. And I have never, ever, ever, ever been in your airplane. I have never, ever been to your home. I couldn't find it. I've never, ever had that reciprocity of courtesy.
Exactly.
Okay. So I wanted to ask you, and by the way, tune in next week,
Yes.
because in next week's podcast, we're going to have Bryce Carlson on next week. And Bryce
He's
Carlson
the fellow that rode
across
rode
the Atlantic Ocean, across the North
which
Atlantic.
is amazing just to even say it.
Alone,
Yeah.
no support boat.
Yes.
Phenomenal.
And he's going to be here.
He will be here at Folk School Coffee Parlor next week, and he will be
Timing's
here.
an issue because he's trying to get across the Ohio River.
That's right. That's
And
it.
that
Good point.
Atlantic Ocean, piece of cake, the Ohio River, because, it's tough. It's muddy.
Is that it? Is it
Very
best you
much.
got?
No, it's flying in today. It's really, now, of course, it's because the serious issue is the flooding, but it's a tough issue here.
It is a tough issue. And we're recording this on the eve of, by a couple days of this huge storm coming up on South Carolina. So we don't, it hasn't happened yet. By the time you hear this, it may have.
Yeah.
And speaking of archived episodes, because most people hear this as it's archived, our episodes come out about 6 days after we record them. You can always want to remind people, you can see this live every episode. If you go to jerryspringer.com, that lays out the schedule. Then you can watch on Facebook Live by simply connecting up with us on the Jerry Springer Podcast Facebook page by liking it, and then you can see us live. Or you can go to jerryspringer.com because we live stream it. So there is a way to hear these and see these as they're happening.
And the way we look, it's a treat to see us live.
You think, huh?
Yeah. Well, actually, you better hurry up.
We may not have much
If you
time
want to
left.
see us live, get your tickets now.
Well, let's put it this way. If you want to see us live in kind of a hip environment, a youthful, edgy, hipster coffee shop, then come see us now.
Come in person.
Because in about a year or very soon after that, we're going to be doing this from a senior citizen home.
Yeah.
So it'll be in like the dining room.
Yeah.
They'll put up a table with a couple fake mics.
You know how we did the elevator comics?
Yeah, that didn't.
By the way,
that failed, by the way.
Oh, it did not fail. Well, I'm still getting requests.
Yeah.
But we're going to hit the nursing home soon.
Yeah, that's right. We're going to start
We could
working.
be an
nursing
act
homes.
in the nursing homes.
Elevator comics is you get on an elevator, and between the time it took to go between first floor and third floor, we would do jokes like stand-up comedy.
And
We'd be
people
over in
are
the
stuck
corner.
they're on the elevator with us, and we do jokes.
Yeah, we'd be over in the corner, and I'd say, "Hey, Jerry, who was that older guy you were talking to? He's pointing to his ear."
Oh, the guy with the hearing aid?
Yeah, what
He's
was that
telling
all
me
about?
This is the finest hearing aid money can buy.
Really?
Yeah, so
What'd you
I
ask?
said, yeah, well, what kind is it? He said 4 o'clock.
Hey, who? I wanted to ask you about, speaking of archived. Hey, Bree, you want to come up here?
1, 2.
Hey, Bree, $600. He's getting his wallet out. The whole damn wallet. Hey, Supreme Court, the hearings are upon us, and we've had hearings, and now they're into this next phase. So what do you think of Brett Kavanaugh, his chances, and that whole situation?
By the time most people that listen to our podcast, by the time they actually hear it, will know whether or not, he's been confirmed and is the next Supreme Court justice. And for those of us of our political bent. The idea of him on the Supreme Court, which would make the court, frankly, pretty right-wing conservative, and it has an enormous impact, as any Supreme Court appointment would be. But his, of course, as we've all said, is he tips. There's no longer the middle vote. Which way is Kennedy going to go? Because when he retired, Kavanaugh will always go to the right. It's hard to find, cases in his judicial history where he's been anywhere even close to moderate. So you've got a right-wing Supreme Court, and he's young enough that this is going to be for, it's a lifetime appointment. So we could be talking decades. And that's how serious this is. The Supreme Court, one, it's the lifetime appointment, and two, it's so consequential. I mean, just in recent years, the conservative Supreme Court chose who our president would be in the year 2000, and it's chipped away for these last decades on Roe versus Wade. It's this right-wing court has placed in jeopardy minority voting rights, workers' rights to organize, workers' rights to sue, consumer rights, women's rights over their own bodies, rights of gays and lesbians and transgender, the whole issue of gun control, Citizens United, which has basically turned political fundraising over to, large corporations. So these are very consequential decisions that the court makes. Initially, it was set up to be the third branch of government. And it was set up to be this basically nonpartisan issuance of real justice, that the executive, the president, and the Congress can fight over issues, legislation, but when it was time for the wisdom from above, it would come from the Supreme Court. And yet, those days are gone. The Supreme Court is now just a weapon for the party in power. It's been weaponized. There's no longer, we'll go to the Supreme Court and find out what the truthful answer is. It's not. They have an agenda. And it's absurd to believe that the court doesn't have an agenda anymore. Now, our founding fathers didn't make a mistake, because when they wrote the Constitution, they didn't know there'd be such a thing as political parties. Political parties didn't come around till 1800. So in the beginning, there was no thought to that. But over the years, particularly in the 20th century, the Supreme Court started to have its own ideology. Early part of the 20th century, it was incredibly conservative. And to be fair, the Democrats have played partisanship with the Supreme Court as well. Franklin Roosevelt gets arrested. Franklin Roosevelt gets elected. Nowadays, it's hard to tell the difference between being elected and being arrested. Donald Trump. So, yeah. But he gets elected in 1932 as a response to the Depression. And all of a sudden, in comes the New Deal, which was this most significant movement of America, in the last century. There's no question. The government had made the decision, which the American public has bought into, that government has a role to play in making sure there's people at the bottom will be helped, that people in times of trouble will be helped. And so the New Deal came along and gave us all this very significant legislation, whether it was the National Recovery Act, the Agricultural Adjustment Act, minimum wage, maximum number of hours, all the way up through Social Security. I mean, things that we don't even think about anymore. Obviously, it's part of American life and the role of government. That was the New Deal. But the Supreme Court came along in 1936 after Roosevelt gets reelected by the largest margin since George Washington. And the Supreme Court came along and tried to do away with all the New Deal legislation, saying that this was moving towards communism. This was socialism, at least. It was doing away with the American ideal. And they literally called unconstitutional the New Deal legislation. Well, Roosevelt, now seeing that he got this huge re-election victory, he overstepped his bounds at the time. And he decided, well, if he couldn't get this Supreme Court to go along with the New Deal, he would just expand the size of the Supreme Court from 9 members to 15. He would add 6 new Supreme Court justices. He said at the time, which wasn't really honest, he says, well, the Supreme Court, the members are getting so old, it's too much of a burden for them to take all these cases. We're just going to have more Supreme Court justices. And so he said, for every member of the Supreme Court who is 70 years and older, I'll appoint a new one. And of course, he would appoint 6. There were 6 that were 70 or older. And so he would appoint 6 that were liberal. And therefore, his New Deal legislation could survive. Well, everyone caught on to what he was doing, and there was a great public reaction, and it was beaten back. But that's just to see that once in a while, Democrats get involved in playing politics with the Supreme Court. And it wasn't just FDR also playing politics with the Supreme Court. Well, the Supreme Court, the Warren Court came about in the 1950s and 60s. And the Warren Court, God bless it, from our point of view, all of a sudden it made wonderful decisions. Obviously, the Civil Rights Act is the most prominent one, but also increasing the rights of defendants, et cetera. And so it was greatly liberalized, but it became a political issue because those of us old enough to remember, you drive down highways in America, and remember those signs, impeach Earl Warren? So Republican candidates were getting elected that if they get elected, they'll move to impeach the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. So it was political then as well. And then in the 80s, President Reagan nominates Robert Bork. And Robert Bork, to his credit, was totally honest. He said what his view was on issues such as Roe versus Wade, et cetera. Nowadays, everyone dodges the issues, but he actually said where he stood. And the Democrats stopped the appointment of Robert Bork, not on competence, but clearly because of his position on issues. And that really was about the first time that political parties didn't even pretend to look for just a qualified person to be a Supreme Court justice. That, with Bork, really was the first time that a political party said, honestly, we don't like your politics, therefore you can't be on the Supreme Court. And it has been political ever since. These hearings are a sham. Everyone comes up, they get the questions which they know they're going to get, and they never answer. They dodge, they dodge the bullet. They say, well, I don't want to deal with a hypothetical. Or I can't give you an answer on that particular question because it's a current case. And that answer is understandable. But to say in this interview of a person to be a Supreme Court justice, I won't answer hypotheticals, why don't we say, then leave? Because when you have a job interview, virtually every question you get, other than your background, is a hypothetical. How would you deal with this situation? We want to know before we make a decision to confirm you or to hire you, how you would deal with this. That's a very appropriate question. And what makes this, particularly with Kavanaugh, a legitimate, fair question to ask is the fact that he was asked, would he recuse himself if the question of whether President Trump can be subpoenaed or whether he can be indicted, he says, that's a hypothetical, I will not answer that. It's not a hypothetical. It's something that we have to know whether he's going to recuse himself, because that is conflict of interest. There is no possible way, if he gets approved on the Supreme Court, and there is now a decision on whether or not Trump can get subpoenaed or Trump can be indicted, he has to vote on that. The guy that appoints him is the one that now he's going to sit in judgment of him. If that isn't a conflict of interest, what is? I mean, if that isn't one, what is? It makes no sense. We have an illegitimate president, and I say that because that's God's truth. He's the illegitimate president, didn't get as many votes as Hillary did, was aided by the Russians, and now we find out that he paid off someone to keep quiet 2 weeks before the election that no person on this earth believes wouldn't have been the difference of the only 70,000 votes that made him president in Wisconsin and Michigan. Okay? So he's the illegitimate president. I know technically he's the president, but don't for a second think that that was the wish of the American people in a fair election. So you got an illegitimate president picking someone to be on the Supreme Court that will be the deciding vote, because it's 4-4, deciding vote on whether he can be indicted and whether he can be subpoenaed. How is that not conflict of interest? There can never be another case of conflict of interest if he doesn't recuse himself from that. And if he doesn't say ahead of time that I would recuse myself from, in other words, we're not asking him to give his opinion on whether or not an indictment, a president can be indicted. We're not asking him to give his opinion on whether or not a president can be subpoenaed. Keep that to yourself. But there is a conflict which we already know exists. And therefore, if there is any honor in this system, Republican, Democrat, anybody has to say, you have to recuse yourself from that issue by itself. If he doesn't, this whole thing is a sham. So what's the remedy? There are remedies, though I don't have confidence in any of them. Obviously, it would be great if we could get back the filibuster, that you would need 60 votes to get a Supreme Court nominee approved. Because that would mean you'd have to get votes from the other party. It couldn't just be one party's nomination. I think better would be the Senate passing a law which says, in order to be approved to the United States Supreme Court, you have to get the votes of a majority of both parties. 50% of the Democrats, 50% of Republicans, whoever it is, because that would force us not having a person of extreme views on the Supreme Court. If you have to get a majority of both parties, every president would have to pick someone that was acceptable to both sides, and you'd get moderation. That is the proper way to do it. Do I have any confidence that it'll happen? No, because in order to get that passed, the Senate has to pass it, and they're not going to pass it because the Republicans are in control now. They don't want to give it up. And if the Democrats get into power, they probably don't want to give it up either. They're right to have one. The only answer is, as is with all these questions, is you get Democrats to control the Congress for now, and then everybody that goes to the polls from now on, any politician that endorses anyone that supports a Supreme Court nominee who will reduce the rights of our citizens, either take away women's rights, minority rights, gay and lesbian rights, workers' rights, anybody that seeks to reduce the rights that individuals have in America is not fit to sit on the Supreme Court of the United States. That's not partisanship. That's just justice.
Good one, Jerry. We're going to bring up now a group called Hickory Robot. And as they are coming in, I want to mention that you can hear their music at hickoryrobot.com. Pretty straightforward. And they're on iTunes and usual places you can hear good music. Tell us who you are, if you would.
I'm Jim.
And
Jim
Jim,
Pills.
introduce the group real fast, would you please?
Okay. We're just meeting. This is Scott Carter
Right.
on mandolin, Lauren Schlomer
Hello.
on
Okay.
fiddle, and back on bass is Mr. Aaron Jacobs.
All right, and where do you guys, hey, welcome.
Thank you.
Hickory Robot. Tell us where you guys are from. Are you,
Cincinnati area.
okay, good. And do a song for us, and then we'll talk on the other side. would
Be
you?
happy to.
Okay.
Ride the rails, I take the green line, 2 steps from my home. I watch the lights as they pass by. I wish I was alone. My tie is tight, my coat is heavy, briefcase in my hand. I've got a wife and 2 children. I've got a mortgage and a van. I work downtown, it's unfulfilling, but it buys groceries and gas. We PTA, we take vacations, the kids grow up so fast. Sometimes at night, when she's sleeping and there's nothing left to do, I shut my eyes, dream of college and my memories of you. Did you ever get to Paris? You always had such style. In your wildest dreams, could you imagine we join the rank and file? We join the rank and file. We used to talk with such passion about poetry and war. We used to laugh with such abandon. The world was just outside our door. But we were young and immortal, with a fire down below. We had our lives, we had each other, we had more than we could know.
That's a great song. Lauren, good job.
Thank you.
Very cool.
And what, the other guys didn't do a good
no,
job?
No, well, they did. In fact, written by, who wrote that?
I wrote that.
Jim
Jim.
Jim wrote that. Jim Pels, correct?
Correct, yes.
Very cool. And
Thank
it's
you.
called Rank and File.
It's
You
called Rank
probably
and File. Mhm.
caught the refrains. Tell us how did you guys come together here in this greater Cincinnati area?
Well, we're celebrating our 10th anniversary.
All right.
So the story goes back 10 years, but we won't take that long.
And you have an album that's in production now.
We do.
You
Yeah.
can't hear you on Spotify and hickoryrobot.com,
Correct.
iTunes.
Facebook, you can find us
Good.
all over. Instagram. We have 2 albums out, Firefly and Sawyer, and we're working on our 3rd one. It's turning out really, really nice. We're very excited. Basically, Scott and I were kind of working at the same location 10 years ago, and we kept talking about getting together and playing, and you know, hey, call it Hickory Robot and laugh, and then we got a gig, and 10 years later, here we are.
Well, it's fantastic. And we're going to get these guys back, maybe get them back, in fact, next week. They're a local band, so we can do that. Would you take us out on Down by the Riverside, and Jerry Springer will jump in on the second verse?
We'd be happy to.
All right, here we go. Hickory Robot.
Lay down my heavy load down by the riverside, down by the riverside, down by the riverside.
You've been listening to Tales, Tunes, and Tomfoolery, recorded live at the Folk School Coffee Parlor in Ludlow, Kentucky. Thanks to Patrick Kennedy for writing our opening song, and to you for listening. Check out our website, jerryspringer.com.